It started with a sound, a single metallic snap, high above the clouds, a routine flight carrying dozens of passengers, suddenly faced a terrifying mechanical breakdown. It wasn't the first time, and it certainly wasn't going to be the last. Within hours, video clips of the incident flooded the internet. News channels began broadcasting live updates. Stock prices plunged in real time, but while Western media treated this as just another corporate embarrassment, a group of aviation executives in Beijing was sitting in an emergency meeting, staring at a screen. They weren't panicking. They were calculating, because that single mechanical failure was the precise moment the dominoes began to fall. For over half a century, global travel was governed by a quiet, unbreakable agreement. If you wanted to fly anywhere on Earth, you had to ride inside a machine built by one of two massive entities, Boeing in America or Airbus in Europe. Together, they held a complete, multi-trillion-dollar monopoly, a barrier to entry so absurdly high that no company and no country had ever successfully broken it. If you tried to build your own passenger jet, you were laughed out of the industry. The engineering was too complex, the supply chains were too guarded, and the safety certifications were impossible to clear, until a single order was quietly cancelled. It happened without a flashy press release. A major regional airline, fed up with delivery delays, grounded fleets, and endless safety investigations, walked away from a multi-billion-dollar contract. They didn't buy from Airbus either. Their factories were already booked solid for the next decade. Instead, the airline signed a check and sent it somewhere nobody expected, to a state-backed manufacturer that Western experts had spent 15 years dismissing as a joke. That single transaction shattered the invisible law of global aviation, but what nobody realized at the time was where that new jet actually came from and how long this trap had been set. To understand how a multi-trillion-dollar monopoly began to crumble overnight, you have to look at what was happening behind closed doors 20 years ago. Back then, Western aerospace executives were celebrating record profits. They realized that building planes was expensive, but managing stock prices was easy, so they started cutting costs. They outsourced manufacturing, laid off senior engineers, and streamlined their supply chains to maximize quarterly returns. They believed their market position was so dominant that airlines had no other choice, even if a plane had flaws. Where else were airlines going to go? Meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, a team of foreign engineers was given a directive: build a commercial airliner capable of carrying hundreds of passengers from a completely clean slate. The early days were an absolute disaster. Prototype parts didn't fit together. Early engine tests failed. Western analysts published detailed reports claiming the project was a colossal waste of taxpayer money. They called the aircraft primitive, unsafe, and decades behind schedule, and Boeing believed them. They assumed the project would quietly die in a bureaucrat's office, so Boeing doubled down on its strategy. They took an old, 50-year-old airframe design, shoved massive new engines onto it, and used complex software to hide the aerodynamic imbalance. It was a fast, cheap way to keep Wall Street happy, while Boeing was patching up old designs. Their rival was building massive, ultramodern manufacturing hubs out of empty land, automated assembly lines, high-altitude testing sites, and advanced wind tunnels. They weren't trying to build a plane for yesterday, they were building the infrastructure for tomorrow. And then, the second domino fell. 2 catastrophic crashes, separated by just 5 months, shocked the entire world. The software system designed to save money had failed. The entire global fleet of Boeing's flagship aircraft was grounded overnight. Airlines were stranded. Thousands of flights were canceled. Billions of dollars vanished into thin air. The invincible reputation of Western engineering had evaporated in a matter of weeks, and right at that exact moment, the hidden hangar doors in Shanghai slid open. Out rolled the C919, a sleek, single-aisle passenger jet, engineered with modern digital architecture, fresh aerodynamics, and a spacious cabin design. It wasn't a crude knockoff. It was a direct, high-tech competitor to the 2 most popular planes in human history. Within days of its commercial debut, domestic carriers began placing orders: 10 jets, 50 jets, 100 jets. Then came the landmark moment. a massive order for over 100 aircraft, signed by a single state carrier. The orders weren't just coming from inside the country. Emerging nations across Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America, facing massive waitlists from Western manufacturers, started asking a simple question. Why wait 8 years for an expensive plane tied to Western political sanctions, when a modern alternative is rolling off the assembly line right now? Suddenly, Boeing wasn't just facing a public relations nightmare. They were losing their most important growth market on Earth. But here is where the story takes a much darker, far more complex turn. When Western intelligence agencies began analyzing the new jet, they discovered a startling truth. The plane wasn't entirely domestic. In fact, its engines, avionics, and flight control systems were supplied by major American and European companies. Western leaders breathed a sigh of relief. They believed they still held the ultimate leverage. If geopolitical tensions escalated, Washington could simply ban the export of those engines, grounding the entire fleet instantly. It seemed like checkmate, except it was a deliberate trap. The new manufacturer knew the West would eventually try to cut off key components. So while they built the first generation of jets using foreign engines to get airworthiness approvals, they were quietly running a parallel program in total secrecy. Deep inside an undisclosed testing facility, engineers were developing an indigenous high-bypass turbofan engine, built specifically to replace the Western ones. Every year, as Western nations threatened sanctions, the rival accelerated its domestic supply chain, replacing foreign flight computers, foreign composite materials, and foreign radar systems, piece by piece. When Western suppliers threatened to cut off parts, they didn't stop the project. They merely handed the market over to domestic competitors who were waiting in the wings. Now, look at the board. Boeing is buried under hundreds of billions of dollars in legacy debt. Quality control scandals continue to make global headlines. Factories are struggling with supply shortages. And delivery dates keep getting pushed further into the future. On the other side, a state-backed behemoth, with unlimited capital, is scaling up mass production, expanding assembly plants to pump out dozens of new aircraft every single month. The math is brutal. The global single-aisle airliner market is worth over $3 trillion over the next 2 decades. Over 40% of that demand comes from a single continent. If Western manufacturers lose access to that airspace, their economies of scale collapse completely. Fewer sales mean higher production costs per plane. Higher production costs mean less budget for research and development. Less research budget means falling even further behind. It is an industrial death loop, and it has already begun. This isn't just about who builds the planes we sit in. It is about who controls the sky. If a nation controls the aircraft fleet, they control the satellite navigation systems, the global maintenance networks, the pilot training facilities, and the trade routes of the 21st century. We are watching the birth of a multipolar aviation world. On one side, Western airspace, locked into aging platforms and supply chain bottlenecks. On the other side, a massive, state-funded ecosystem, offering cheap, modern jets to any nation willing to align with them. Airlines in developing countries are already doing the math. They don't care about industrial heritage or brand loyalty. They care about cost, reliability, and availability. And right now, the company that once defined global aviation cannot deliver enough planes to satisfy its own backlog. The first domino was a broken component in midair. The second was a grounded fleet. The third was a canceled contract. The final domino is taking off right now. As you sit in an airport terminal, looking out at the tarmac, you are looking at the final years of an untouchable Western empire. The sky